It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of September 11th, 1998. We have 7 movies to look at today, 6 new releases, 1 re-release, so we have a lot to get to regardless, so let's go ahead and jump right on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, Matt Damon and Edward Norton and John Dahl's Rounders. So the term Rounders refers to a person traveling around from city to city seeking high-stakes card games, and you have 2 friends, Matt Damon and Edward Norton, who need to win at high-stakes poker games to quickly pay off a large debt. This comes from John Dahl, who gave us The Last Seduction, Red Rock West, and his last movie, Unforgettable, was forgettable. That's probably the best way to describe that. But this was a nice return to form for him. Not one of his best movies, but features a lot of good performances, enough to really make the film worth it, especially with the atmospheric edge of the movie, the visual style of the film. Matt Damon and Edward Norton are great in this. A lot of good people in this. John Turturro, John Malkovich, Famke Janssen, Michael Rispoli, Martin Landau, Gretchen Mol, Melinda Carides from Providence, Lenny Clark, Goran Viznik. Just a solid cast overall here. It is a stylish-looking film. Maybe not to the levels of something like Swingers a couple years prior to this, but it's really it's an interesting film enough, and like I said, it was a nice return to form for this director, John Dahl, whose last movie was not that great, but also this came to us from Brian Kaufman and David Levian, who later go on to write stuff like The Illusionist. They'd write Solitary Man, Ocean's 13, they did Knockaround Guys, if I'm not mistaken, too, the Vin Diesel movie that came out a couple years later. Pretty good writers overall. Pretty solid film overall. Nothing too crazy to really go into about this one. I mean, it basically delivers what you'd expect it to for a film about the underground world of high-stakes poker, and it pretty much delivers on everything it promises there. So, definitely worth checking out. So, definitely check that one out. That's Rounders, so let's go ahead and move on to the next movie we have here, and that is Simon Birch. God, I can only wish I show you the trailer for this, because it literally begins with Jim Carrey pulling the whimsy look up in the air as he's thinking back to his past, like you see in these melodramatic, Oscar baitish type movies, and it's literally that in this entire movie. Okay, maybe I'm being a little too harsh on this, but the movie itself is not really all that good. The performances, they're fine for what they are. Everybody's committing to the role here, but you've seen this story done over and over again, and this is a film that's clearly trying to get in the cheap emotion out of you. It's trying to be an Oscar baitish type film, a cliched-riddled film. I really don't know what else to say about this movie that hasn't already been said already. It's directed by Mark Steven Johnson, who later gave us Daredevil and Ghost Rider, and features a cast that includes Ian Michael Smith in the title role, Joseph Mazzola from Jurassic Park, Jim Carrey, Ashley Judd, Oliver Platt. Good talent overall. David Strathairn's in here as well. I mean, it's got good talent overall here, but just the story and just everything that it does, it tries to throw the cheapest emotions at you. It is not a good movie whatsoever. It's a shame because so much talent is involved in this, and you expect so much better, but it's pretty much what you expect it to be. It's an Oscar baitish movie. You got those scenes that are clearly trying to be something that they use at the Academy Awards in the spring, and yeah, if you're smart enough, you could pretty much pick that out right away and pretty much avoid this movie. But yeah, it just didn't work for me. So anyway, so that's Simon Birch. Let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, and that is the re-release of Orson Welles' classic, Touch of Evil. Touch of Evil, of course, is written and directed by Orson Welles, which was kind of right in the middle of his success in the early days. When he broke out with Citizen Kane and then The Magnificent Ambersons. This was actually released by Universal, and Charlton Heston stars in this movie along with Janet Leigh, and Welles was also hired to direct and star in the film, as well as rewrite the script. There was creative differences after the film finished production between Welles and Universal, who forced him off the film, and Universal basically re-edited the film themselves to a more conventional movie. And the film was not received well by critics when it came out. In fact, Orson Welles actually wrote a 58-page memo in which he outlined his creative vision for the film and asked that his version be restored. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And like I said, it got panned by critics. It was not a big hit as far as in the U.S., but it did receive popularity among European audiences and actually won top awards there. And during the 1970s, the film was actually given a new renaissance to it. Its reputation was renewed, and the film has actually become one of Orson Welles' last great films, and actually one of the best classic era noir films, as well as one of the last ones. And so finally, in 1998, they actually re-edited this movie based on his memo that he wrote back when this movie came out. So it's a very interesting film to take a look at, honestly, when you see the differing versions of this, because they actually did put both versions out on DVD, if I'm not mistaken. And the basic premise of the movie here is that you've got this Mexican narcotics officer who has to interrupt his honeymoon on the Mexican-U.S. border when an American building contractor is killed after someone plants a bomb in his car. And he's killed on the U.S. side of the border, but it's clear that the bomb was planted on the Mexican side. And as a result, Vargas delays his return to Mexico City, where he's been mounting a case against the Grandy family, crime and narcotics syndicate. So they have this police captain come in charge of the U.S. side, and he soon finds a suspect, a Mexican named Manolo Sanchez. And Vargas is soon out onto Quinlan and his Sergeant Pete Menzies when he catches them planning evidence to convict Sanchez. And when this new American wife, Susie, safely tucked away in a hotel room on the U.S. side of the border, or so he thinks, he starts to review Quinlan's earlier cases. While concentrating on the corrupt policemen, however, the Grandys have their own plan for Vargas, and they start with his wife, Susie. So that's kind of where that scene in the beginning there takes place. And I've seen the movie before. I won't say it's one of Orson Welles' best movies. I mean, you can't really top Citizen Kane or something like The Magnificent Ambersons, but it is still a great Orson Welles noir film. I mean, it's a great film, great acting overall. Charlton Heston, Janet Leigh, Orson Welles, Zsa Zsa Gabor. I mean, the talent is clearly there, and there is a lot of really good stylistic shots in the movie that make it worth watching on those merits. I definitely say check out the Welles version, the re-release version that came out in '98. The other version that came out is fine for what it is, but definitely the Orson Welles version, I think, does a better job of showing what Welles' true vision for this film really was going to be like. It's a very good film. I'd say definitely check it out if you can find it. So that's Touch of Evil. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie. A pretty cool looking film here, coming up here, and that is Cube. Yeah, if you've seen the game Half Dead, it's pretty much they pretty much took the inspiration from this movie. And Cube is basically a story where you have individuals trapped inside this bizarre and deadly labyrinth of cube-shaped rooms. So every time you go into a room, you get like all these different traps. You get like in one area you'll get like motion detectors, like you could throw a boot into a room, kind of like what you do in the video game. And this is a film that has gone on to have a cult following. It's definitely very Kafka-esque in terms of the way it's stylized and the way the film looks. And they've been trying to make a remake of this movie in America for years now, and I think they just realized that how can we compete with this? I mean, this is a really damn good movie. Just the style and the look of the film alone is beautiful enough to look at, but then you add this other element, this great storyline, and it just makes for a very intriguing, very tense, and very chilling movie. Like, you really are... Like you're part of, you feel like you're part of this group as every time you go into a room, you're thinking to yourself, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? It's just like, it's a really cool film. It's a really enjoyable film. I really enjoy it a lot. I think it's a very good, underrated film that is slowly but surely gaining attention as it's gone on in the years since its release. I really don't want them to remake this movie in America because really, I don't think you could really top what they did here. Plus, there's already a good remake, and that's the Half Dead video game. I mean, Half Dead really is kind of like that, kind of pretty much a better remake than anything that Lionsgate probably would do with this, but it's definitely a great film. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, because it's definitely worth the time. So check that movie out, Cube. With that said, on to the next movie, and hey, who wants some more Oscar bait? It's Without Limits. Yeah, this is pretty much another Oscar bait movie, but I will say it's not the worst thing ever. I mean, it certainly could be. It certainly isn't as bad as Simon Birch was, but it's actually the second movie about Steve Prefontaine. We talked about the other movie, Prefontaine, with Jared Leto, but here you follow the relationship between him and his coach, Bill Bowerman, played by Donald Sutherland, who later co-founded Nike. And you have Billy Crudup playing Prefontaine, Donald Sutherland is Bowerman, like I said, Monica Potter is in here, Jeremy Sisto, Judith Ivey, Matthew Lillard, directed by Robert Towne, and also written by him. It's not the worst thing ever, and it's probably a terrible way to sell the movie, but It's definitely very Oscar baitish, but at the same time, it's not the worst thing you could see. It's a film that is competently done. I think it does tell a better story about this guy, C. Prefontaine, than Prefontaine did. And, I don't know, neither one of them really was that great to me, but this is the one that I'd say I kind of liked a little bit more, mostly because of the performances by Crudup and Sutherland. Not much more to say about that one here. I liked it, but it's not one I'd rather watch over and over again. Maybe for one-time watch, it's fine for what it is, but other than that, not so much. But so that's Without Limits, and that was Oscar baitish, but this is really Oscar baitish. This next movie, Digging to China. Kevin Bacon went full retard, everybody. This is Oscar baitish to the max. I mean, this makes Simon Birch look like a masterpiece by comparison. So what more do I even need to say about this? You have a story about a friendship between a preteen girl with a vivid imagination and a man with mental disabilities, and you could pretty much explain what else is going to happen here. You pretty much can tell what's going to happen from this point on. I mean, directed by Timothy Hutton, his first film as a director, which I think is the only film he's directed, if I'm not mistaken, because I don't know if there's anything else he's directed since then. Now I'm kind of curious. Let's see. I know this is dead air here, but, I mean, he's directed a couple things. He's directed an episode of Amazing Stories. He directed a couple of episodes of New York Worth, but I think this is the only film he's directed as a whole, but, what more do I even need to say about this movie? It's one of those movies that Tropic Thunder warned is pretty much made fun of, the fact that you can't go full retard, and Kevin Bacon clearly went full retard for this. But Evan Rachel Wood's in here. She's pretty decent in here. That's pretty much all I can say about that. But there's not much more I can add to this. This is not a good-looking. This is not a film that's going to be memorable for anything except for being a part of that list of films of actors that, again, go full retard and try to think they can win an Oscar for it, and not so much. So let's go ahead and wrap this up with our last movie here, and that is Chicago Cab, or Hell Cab, whichever one you want to call it. So you've got this unnamed taxi driver over one day in Chicago shortly before Christmas. He has like 30 different passengers enter his taxi throughout the course of the film, providing brief looks into their personal lives. And among those actors, you see Gillian Anderson, John Cusack, Laurie Metcalf, Julianne Moore, John C. Reilly, Michael Shannon, Michael Ironside, Reggie Hayes. And I think a lot of people really do not like this movie because the film pretty much, I'm reading on here, it received criticism for having unrealistic taxi passengers since all of the characters have an exciting story. And as you know, that's probably the truest thing you could possibly say about this, because there's not really a whole lot of interesting stories going on with most taxi drivers. I mean, Taxi Cab Confessions, if you ever watch that show, most of those stories are not that interesting whatsoever. If you go into a taxi in real life, it's not that interesting whatsoever. Nobody really has that, not that many people have that much of an exciting story to tell. And I get what they were trying to do here with this movie, but yeah, that's part of the biggest problem with it, is that it thinks that if they could it thinks that they can make every single person in this have an interesting story going on here. It almost turns into Cosmopolis in a way, where you're just sitting in a car for a good majority of the film, but nothing interesting is happening with every passenger that comes in. You know, I mean, what's the point? Like, what's the reason why I should be invested in these characters whatsoever? And there really is not that much there. I mean, it's just not an engaging film whatsoever. It's a boring movie. It's a really boring, dull film that has nothing about it whatsoever. It was based on a play, apparently, and maybe this could work better as a play, but I don't know. I mean, having every single character have this amazing story about themselves, I think that was stretching the walls of plausibility a little bit too high there, guys. So anyway, not much more to say about that one. That's Chicago Cab. And with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker star in one of the biggest comedy hits of the year, Rush Hour. We have yet another Oscar bait film with One True Thing. We have Permanent Midnight, A Soldier's Daughter Never Cries, Six String Samurai, and Ill-Gotten Gains. So 6 movies to look at next time around. We'll delve into those on the next episode. But until then, Thank you very much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the button on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I am off. I will see you next time, and until then, as always, take care.